It's Peggy. I went live last Saturday with chapter 3, but I was having some camera and microphone issues, so I thought today I would just read chapter 3 to you again. So here we go. It's entitled Flight in the Night. For hours, poor Much Afraid lay sleepless on her bed, too bruised in mind and body to rest in one position, but tossing and turning wearily from side to side until long after midnight. Somewhere at the back of her mind was a dreadful uneasiness, as though there was something she ought to remember, but was unable to do so. When at last she fell asleep, this thought still haunted her. She woke suddenly an hour or two later, her mind intensely alert, conscious of an agonizing pain such as she had never known before. The thorn in her heart was throbbing and aching in a manner she could scarcely bear. It was as though the pain was hammering out something which at first she was still too confused to be able to understand. Then all of a sudden, in a terrible flash, it became clear to her, and she found herself whispering over and over, "The shepherd came and called me as he promised, but I didn't go to him or give him any answer. Supposing he thought that I had changed my mind and didn't want to go with him. Supposing he has gone and left me behind. Gone without me. Yes, left me behind." The shock of this thought was awful. This was the thing she had forgotten. He would not be able to understand why she had not gone out to meet him as he had told her. He had urged her to be ready to go with him the instant that he called, that there must be no delay, that he himself had to go to the mountains on urgent business. She had not been able to even go to the trysting place as usual that evening. So a trysting place is a meeting place, a secret place, usually for lovers. Of course he would think that she was afraid. Perhaps he was gone already and alone. Poor Much Afraid turned icy cold, and her teeth chattered, but it was the pain in her heart which was the most awful part of her distress. It seemed to suffocate her as she lay there in bed. She sat up, shivering with cold and with the horror of the thought. She could not bear it had gone and left her behind. So Much Afraid didn't really know the shepherd too well at this point, and she didn't understand his kind of love for her, agape love, unconditional love. She didn't understand. She also didn't know that he wouldn't leave her. The Lord says, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." And that's the truth, but she didn't know it yet. So let's continue. On the table beside her lay the old songbook. Glancing down at it in the light of the lamp, she saw it was open at the page wherein was written a song about another shepherdess. She, just like herself, had failed to respond to the call of love, and then found too late that love had gone away. It had always seemed to her such a sad song that she could hardly read it. But now, as she read the words again in the dark loneliness of the night, it seemed as though it was the cry of her own forlorn and terrified heart. Here's how it went. "By night on my bed I sought him, he whom my soul loveth so. I sought, but I could not find him, and now I will rise and go. Out in the streets of the city, and out on the broad highway, for he whom my soul so loveth has left me and gone away." The page in the little songbook ended there, and she did not turn the page. Suddenly she could bear the uncertainty no longer. She must see for herself at once if he really had gone away and left her behind. She slipped out of bed, dressed herself as quickly as her shaking fingers would allow, and then unlocked the cottage door. She too would go out into the street and the broad highway and would see if she could find him, would see if he had gone and left her behind. Or, oh, if only it were possible, if he had waited to give her another chance. Opening the door, she went out into the darkness. 100 craven fears lurking in the lonely street could not have deterred her at that moment, for the pain in her heart swallowed up fear and everything else and drove her forth. So in the dark hours just before the dawn, Much Afraid started off to look for the shepherd. She could not go quickly because of her lameness, but she limped along the village streets toward the open fields and the sheepfolds. As she went, she whispered to herself, "O shepherd, when you said that love and pain go together, how truly you spoke." Had she but known, or even dimly sensed, what it would be like, could she possibly have consented to let him put the thorn in her heart? It was too late now. It was there. Love was there, and pain too. And she must find the shepherd. At last, limping and breathless, she came to the sheepfolds, still and silent in the dim starlight. 1 or 2 under-shepherds were there, keeping watch over the flocks through the night. And when they heard footsteps approaching, they rose up from the ground and went to greet the intruder. "Who are you?" they challenged her in the darkness, then stared in amazement as their lanterns flashed on the white face and frightened eyes of Much Afraid. "Is the chief shepherd here?" she gasped, as she leaned against the wall of the sheepfold, panting and trying to recover her breath. "No," said the watchman, staring at her curiously. "He left the flocks in our charge this night and gave us his orders. He said that he had to make a journey to the mountains, as he often does, and did not say when he would be back." Oh, Much Afraid couldn't speak. She moaned and pressed her hands to her heart again, feeling as though it would break. What could she do now? He was gone. He had thought that she didn't want to go and had not waited for her. Then, aching with despair, as she leaned tremblingly against the wall of the fold, she remembered the shepherd's face and the loving kindness of the look with which he had invited her to accompany him to the mountains. It came to her mind that he who understood her so well, who knew all about her fears and had compassion on her, would not leave until he was quite sure that she really meant to refuse to go with him. She lifted her eyes, looked across the valley toward the eastern mountains and the high places. A faint streak of light was appearing in the east, and she knew that the sun would soon rise. Suddenly she remembered the last verse of the sad song which she had read, the last verse on the page which she had not waited to turn over. It came whispering into her mind, just as a little bird began to sing in one of the bushes beside her. And here's how it went. "And then, in the dawn, I saw him, he whom my heart loveth so. I found him, held him, and told him I never could let him go." That's from Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Much Afraid ceased trembling and said to herself, I'll go to the trysting place and see if he is waiting for me there." With scarcely a word to the watchman, she turned and hurried southward over the field where Craven Fear had met her towards the sheep pool. Almost forgetting that she was lame, she sped toward the distant trees which fringed the pool. Isn't that interesting? She almost forgot she was lame, and therefore she was able to run fast. Her eyes were not pointed at her own inabilities, but her eyes were pointed outward. She was looking for the shepherd. Just as the sky turned red above the mountains, the joyous babbling sound of cascading water reached her ears. And as she hurried forward, much afraid, suddenly found a cascade of song pouring forth from her own heart. He was there, standing by the pool, looking toward her with the light of the sunrise shining on his face. As Much Afraid stumbled toward him, he stepped quickly to her side, and she fell at his feet, sobbing, "Oh, my Lord, take me with you as you said. Don't leave me behind." "I knew you would come," he said gently. "But Much Afraid, why were you not at the trysting place last evening? Did you not hear me when I passed your cottage and called? I wanted to tell you to be ready to start with me this morning at sunrise." Now, that is interesting too. She thought she was late. Maybe she wouldn't find him, but actually she got there at the exact right time. He was there waiting for her, and this was his planned time for her to be there after all. So he worked it out for her good. I've heard it said, he's never early, he's never late, he's always right on time. And that's true. And he will never leave us nor forsake us. As he spoke to her, the sun rose fully over the peaks of the mountains and bathed them both in a lovely golden light. "I am here," said Much Afraid, still kneeling at his feet, "and I will go with you anywhere." Then the shepherd took her by her hand, and they started for the mountains. How beautiful that is. So beautiful. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you on Saturday at 3 p.m. for chapter 4, and I hope some of you can come on live. Until then, God bless you all. Love you. Bye-bye.